before we get started. Let folks continue to gather. So we'll hang in there for maybe a minute or two. And oh, thank you guys for being here. Thank you, everyone. All right, for folks just joining us, we're going to give it a minute or two before we get started. Maybe about another minute before we get started. So if you can just hold on while we let some other folks join, that would be great. All right. Well, let's go ahead. We've got a pretty good group on here, so let's go ahead and get started. Um, good evening and good afternoon to folks on the West Coast, and thank you all for really taking the time out of your day to join us for our ChildFund Insider Series. This is a series that we do quarterly. It's a virtual event, and we highlight different programs each quarter, and have some of our ChildFund experts share with you some of the work ChildFund is doing. And we really want to allow for our most trusted supporters to kind of have an inside look on these life-changing programs. But today we'll be talking with Janella Nelson. She is our Director of Education for ChildFund, and we're going to, discuss a little bit about the importance that education plays in a child's life, and how ChildFund works to increase children's access to education worldwide. So we're going to start with that, but I want to just hit on the obvious first. So Joan Lundgren, our Senior Director of Philanthropy, she was supposed to be leading the Fireside chat today, but she returned home from an international trip yesterday or this weekend, and she fell ill. So I'm Brandy Haneke, Director of Philanthropy, and Aaron Lader, our Philanthropy Program Specialist. We're going to do our best to kind of fill in for Joan while she is out, and so Aaron and I are going to tag team with Janella. So I'm going to hit on some housekeeping items. If you are familiar with Zoom, this may be something you already know, but if not, at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a chat button. I encourage you to use that throughout the program. You can make comments, provide feedback, just have conversation. And there's also a button for Q&A. There you can ask questions, and we're going to allow time at the end for Janella to answer some of those questions. Anytime, throughout the conversation today, you can ask a question. You don't have to hold it until the end. But if we don't get to your question, we will follow up with you through email. So that way you can be sure to get your question answered. All right, well, I am going to pass this over to Erin later. Again, she's on our team in philanthropy. She's very familiar with our program work, and she is going to lead the conversation with Janella.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Brandy. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you, Janella, for speaking with us today and talking about our education work. So my first question, just to start us off, is I'd love, Janella, for you to tell us a bit about yourself, how you found your way into this work, how you found your way to ChildFund. Just give us a little background on yourself.
Hi, everyone. Thanks again for joining. I'm very passionate about education, so I'm really excited to share what we do here at ChildFund. So my trajectory in this work started very young. I'm originally from North Dakota. And so you wouldn't necessarily think that a North Dakotan would end up kind of all over the world. But my father, who is a plant pathologist, joined the Peace Corps. And then he met my mother, who's a Costa Rican entomologist. So the insects and the bugs And so at a very young age, I learned about international work. And then when I was 8 years old, I met a refugee in Seattle. My first trip to Seattle, my first time taking a taxi, I really remember that. And in line for clam chowder, I met a woman who was a refugee, and I was always intrigued with accents. And so I asked her where she's from, and I heard her story. And so then at that time, I decided I want to do something to help people in other countries. And specifically, then that started my interest in doing development and humanitarian work.
That's great. Thank you so much. And then if you could maybe tell us a little bit about what you do specifically here at ChildFund now that you've come here.
Yeah, so to go on with my trajectory a little bit more, I have worked in different countries in the field of education. I worked in Guinea, West Africa to support the Ministry of Education on girls' education specifically with USAID government funds, as well as I worked in Eastern Chad during the Civil War that was happening on the border in Darfur. And then I also lived in South Sudan for 3 years. And I don't know how many people are familiar with South Sudan, but it had a civil war for 39 years. And so the promise of peace was an amazing opportunity for those of us who were working in education, because South Sudan had the lowest indicators of education. When I started there, there was 92% of women who were illiterate. So very high, very low rates of education and high illiteracy rates. So from working in Africa and different countries, then I came back to the United States, and that's when I started working for ChildFund. And at ChildFund, I'm the education director. So I lead our education work globally in 23 countries in Asia, Africa, and the Americas. And so what does that look like? I've had people ask me, do you go and train teachers yourself? Or do you provide books? And it's kind of a little bit of a variety of different things that I do as an education director. One of the things that I do is my main primary goal is to support my colleagues that are ChildFund colleagues that work in the country offices who are from the different countries where we work, and to ensure that they have the skills and the knowledge about the best practices that are done globally, what is the evidence of what works, and how to facilitate cross-learning across the different countries and different regions. And so that's what I do on a daily basis. And of course, I also get the pleasure of visiting the programs and speaking with the parents and children that are in our programs and the teachers to learn more about how can we improve our programs.
Yeah, great. That's great. Thank you so much. So I think that, most people, especially here in the US, we understand the importance of basic education, but can you tell us a little bit about how important it is to ensure that children's safety and social emotional learning comes into play in education?
Yeah, so in the education sector globally, what we have really focused on for many years was access to education. So in the United States, education is mandatory. We still have children who are out of school, mostly older children in secondary school, but in other countries, that's not the case. So what we have done as a sector in education, those of us who've worked, have really focused on trying to get children in school. So we really did amazing work globally in getting children in school. So then we realized, okay, we've got children in school, but children aren't learning. And so there has been a lot of reports out about learning poverty, which means a child cannot read a simple sentence by the time that they're 10 years old. And we have learned that a lot of children are in school, but they're not really learning for various reasons. And then we had the pandemic, which affected all of us. I'm a parent of 3 children. My children were at home, not in school for a year. And so I really could feel a little bit more empathy for the parents that were going through this globally or who go through this a lot because of the fact that there's different natural disasters or conflicts that affect their children's ability to go to school. So what our programming does is make sure that not only children are in school, but that children are learning, but there's precursors to learning.
Yeah.
And those precursors are children's social emotional skills and their safety. So if a child is scared every day to go to school because something usually could happen on the way to school, that's something that's very serious and can prevent them from wanting to go to school. But also we know globally, unfortunately, there's corporal punishment that happens a lot in school.
Mm-hmm.
We have data from that in many different countries. And well, in all of our countries where we work, we see that there's corporal punishment in school. And so that also affects children's ability to learn because children are scared. They don't form the relationships and the bonds with the teachers that they need to be able to be in a conducive environment to learn. So since the pandemic, now there's more focus on those precursors to learning, the safety and the social emotional skills. And there's a lot of talk in the United States about social emotional skills for years. There's a lot of work that has been done, but it hasn't really transferred into international sector.
Mm-hmm.
Many of us have probably played Simon Says when we were kids. And Simon Says is a social emotional learning game. And that's those games, those simple games teach children specific skills.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we're working in education on, those skills with children, the social emotional skills. And those skills could be communication, they could be empathy, they could be emotional regulation. They're different skills that we're supporting children to ensure that they're in the right place to learn.
Mm-hmm.
In addition, we're focusing on the safety of children, safety at home, and safety also in the classroom to be able to be in the right mental space. So their mental well-being is really important for them to learn.
Yeah. That's great. And I know that you were talking about children's safety, at home. And I know a big thing we talk about as well is that, them feeling safe in their community, at home, those all come together and, are all very important parts of education, even if it's not actually in the classroom. So that's great to learn about. So I know that we have so many amazing education programs across all of our areas, but one that, we have been emphasizing so much in the past few years, and I would love for you to talk about a little bit, is our Education for Protection and Wellbeing program model that ChildFund has created. So I'd love if you could tell us a little bit about that and then sort of take us into what the future of that program might look like.
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk about this program because in 2017, is when I started working with our country colleagues from 15 different countries to develop this program. So we said, what do children really need to learn?
Mm-hmm.
It's not just books, it's not just getting into school, but what is it that children need? And so I had working groups with Asia and Africa and the Americas. So 15 different countries from all the 3 regions, and we came together and discussed what really are the challenges? What are the root causes of why children are not in school? And so we developed together the Education for Protection and Wellbeing. We wanted a global program model based on evidence, based on global evidence, but also based on our expertise and programs that we had been doing that had results. We started developing this program. It was a very comprehensive participatory process with the different country colleagues. And then when we were just in 2019 going to start implementing and collecting data, we started with the ministries of education because wherever we work in tandem with the ministries of education to support their work to ensure there's sustainable programs in education. And then 2020, when the pandemic hit, and so we had to stop the program and all implementation. And like the United States, where I live in Washington, D.C., And in some other countries, schools were closed for a year or 2 years. So we couldn't really start the program. So now, here we are, 2024, and we are piloting, well, we started piloting the program first in Sierra Leone. Well, we started piloting in Sri Lanka and Philippines, and then of course the pandemic hit first in Asia. But so then we started working in Sierra Leone. We've completed the implementation of the program, and we have results from the program. And in fact, as tomorrow, I will be submitting a paper that will be published on our manuscript on the data that we found, the outcomes.
Wow, that's exciting.
So we started in Sierra Leone, and we have now moved, and you see on the map, we have moved to 6 countries. Indonesia is not there, but Indonesia is going to be starting now soon. And so together in these countries, we come together every six weeks virtually to share what we're learning on the implementation of the program. And on Wednesday, I'll be traveling to Sri Lanka, and so will representatives from all 6 countries, so that we can have a workshop together to learn about how we are implementing, what are the lessons learned, what are the outcomes that we're seeing, how can we improve the program and make sure that we have data, where we incorporate the data and the information we're getting from the participants.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just say that, so the program has 4 components. And one of the things that I learned when I was in South Sudan, which, as I mentioned, has the lowest education statistics in the world, is that we as a sector have worked so much with schools and with teachers and children, but we've really kind of put parents on the sidelines. So we do like PTA events with the parents, but we really needed to have a more comprehensive approach. And this is what is unique about this program. This program really works with parents and with teachers and tries to help them build relationships. So parents and teachers every month separately attend these sessions. These sessions work on 7 strategies that are strategies that have been proven to reduce risk to children, to support parental engagement, child well-being, and learning. And the development of some of these strategies was by clinical psychologists who are now at the University of Oregon and University of Texas, who we've been working with for many years. In addition to the parents and teachers attending these sessions, they also attend sessions together every like 4 months or 5 months. So they can come together, build those relationships, establish common behavior norms in school and at home. And we also have an intervention, a direct intervention with children. And that is focused on building their social emotional skills, but it's also focused on self-protection. And when I talk about self-protection, some people say, okay, well, what is that? Is that teaching children like how to protect themselves physically?
Yeah.
Yes, it's not fighting. What we're teaching common knowledge. Well, it's not common knowledge. It's knowledge that they should have. That sometimes as parents, we need to make sure that we tell our children, and we are ultimately responsible. Parents and all adults are ultimately responsible for the protection of children. But what's really important is that we still need to give them this information. And sadly, what was coming out from the country colleagues in the 15 countries is that there was so much abuse happening in these countries. And children didn't know that it was abuse. They had no way to articulate what was happening to them. And they did not know what was wrong. And so because of that, and we'll go to the next slide, one of the things that we decided to do for the program, we have lessons for children that are incorporated in the classroom or after school around their own protection. But we decided the best way to reach them was also to have a comic book. So in this picture, you see 2 children in our program in Uganda who are reading the comic book, Protecting Yourself and Your Friends. So if you go to the next slide. So this comic book, I worked with a professor and an artist at the University of Massachusetts, and as well an illustrator in the Philippines, because we have 2 comic books. And so this one is just teaching children really basic, what is abuse? and that you should always tell a trusted adult. And if that trusted adult doesn't do something, you tell another trusted adult. This is helping children and complementing the lessons that we have for children. And we have this comic book now in 5 languages.
That's very exciting. That's so cool. Yeah, I feel like this is something we don't always think about. I feel like here in the US, there's such a culture of, yeah, those trusted adults being at school. And I feel like this is so amazing that we're teaching children that, you know, they need to speak out while also establishing those relationships with trusted adults in the teacher and parent programming that's paired with it. That's really great.
Yeah, so let me just talk a little bit more about the work that we're doing with teachers. So if you go to the next slide. So these are some of the teachers in our program in Sierra Leone. And we felt that it was really important to help these teachers not only learn about classroom management and pedagogy, but also learn more about social emotional learning and children's well-being. And so in part of that, we're also teaching them strategies on how to regulate their own emotions.
Mm-hmm.
So the parents and teachers, we work with them to how to regulate their own emotions so that they can use other positive strategies to discipline children instead of using corporal punishment.
Mm-hmm.
So these teachers are part of the program. If you go to the next slide, I'm going to share just a little bit of the outcomes we're seeing at the teacher level. So these are the teacher level changes that we've seen in our program. And so as I mentioned, we've already finished in Sierra Leone. We've completed also in Gambia. And soon, in 3 months, we'll be completing the program in Uganda. And I'll be visiting the program next week in Sri Lanka. So the first thing is the reduced corporal punishment in the classroom. Teachers have come out and said, we've learned that corporal punishment was hurting children.
Mm-hmm.
We learned that that was not right. Even though that's what we were doing, our teachers did it, our parents did it, but we found different ways to now manage the children and discipline them.
Mm-hmm.
The next one is improved classroom management. So this is when a teacher has 50 to 80 children in a class, how do you manage that class?
Yeah.
And next is social and gender inclusion in the classroom. I would love to share one of the quotes that the teacher said, that I never realized that the girls could be as strong. And now the girls are doing even better than the boys in the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
And this is because in some of the communities where we work, girls' education is not valued the same.
Mm-hmm.
So next is positive reinforcement in the classroom. So encouraging children, not discouraging children. So when a child makes a wrong, answers a question wrong, encouraging the child instead of using corporal punishment or using humiliation.
Mm-hmm.
And lastly, the SEL skills that I talked about, stress management, communication. Some of the teachers talked about how they would, when they were very stressed and they felt like they were overwhelmed in the classroom, that they would sing a song and it would change the dynamics in the classroom. So learning these strategies that they have,
Mm-hmm.
but they just maybe didn't think about applying them in the classroom.
Yeah, for sure. That's very exciting.
So I'll talk a little bit more about the parents. So this is a picture of me with some of the parents in Sierra Leone. And the reason why I'm talking a lot about Sierra Leone is because we have the outcome data from there, but also that was my most recent visit. If we do another one of these in a few months, I will be having pictures from Sri Lanka and from Honduras. So these, as you see, there's mostly mothers in our program, but there are some fathers that are mixed in there.
Mm-hmm.
And the mothers in our program, they also talked a lot about corporal punishment and how corporal punishment was part of their upbringing and that they did not really know other strategies.
Mm-hmm.
So the next slide. you'll see here that this is the demographic information of education for the parents in the program. So 75% of the women, so they could be grandmothers, mothers, aunts, that are the caregivers of the children in the program, have not had formal education. So none, no education.
Mm-hmm.
And that's partly because in Sierra Leone, there was a civil war for 11 years. So for males, it's 40%. So that's still very high. And that's one of the reasons why I think it's so great that we have this opportunity to work with caregivers in a different way,
Mm-hmm.
because caregivers don't really understand how school works because they never went to school.
Yeah.
Next slide. So these are the 3 key changes that we're seeing at the parent level. And this is, we've asked in questions, self-reported, what they say that there's changes, but we also have data from the children and from the teachers. So the first is increased engagement in school. The second is the social emotional skills. So saying the stress management skills, the communication skills, and then lastly, more positive parenting skills.
Mm-hmm. That's great. I know that, I think a challenge that we see in these countries where parents have, very low formal education rates is getting them to fully understand the importance of sending their children, like you said, especially girls, to school, being involved in their schooling. And it's really great to see that a program like this is changing those mindsets and hopefully, creating a ripple effect of change for the kids that are currently in the program and their kids and everything like that. So it's great to see it already changing minds now, let alone in the future.
Yeah, so here's another picture. This one's from Uganda. And they're doing one of the social emotional activities. So those activities are games. And that's how children learn. Children learn through playing, through games. And so this is a very different way for the teachers to teach, because the teachers usually have been teaching in a remote style that is more teacher-centered. So the teacher speaks and the children just listen and repeat. And so this is a different way. And one of the things that the teachers said that this has really changed the way children see them. Children have a better relationship with them and are more willing to come to them to ask questions and to get help and education because they're not so fearful of teachers.
I can also imagine that, activities like this, the teachers can really gauge whether or not the children are learning. Like you said, when it's a teacher-centered model and they're just speaking and the children are repeating, it's hard to tell if that child all the way in the back is actually retaining what they're saying and being able to take that forward with them. So that's really great.
So these are some of the children in our program in Gambia. And as I was mentioned, in Gambia, we will be finished. We have finished. And so we're just analyzing the data from our program in Gambia. And I have one more slide. And so this is our workshop that took place in Sierra Leone. And as I mentioned, I'm going to Sri Lanka and I will be facilitating a workshop for all of our colleagues from the 6 countries who have been working on the Education for Protection and Wellbeing program. We're going to be visiting the program in Sri Lanka, and then we're going to have a workshop to learn and to cross-share. And I would just like to say that this is possible because of a gift that somebody gave to ChildFund. And that gift, the person specifically designated that gift for education. And so thanks to that gift, we were able to focus on how can we really build the capacity of our colleagues in the country offices. I've been with ChildFund for 11 years. And 2 years ago was the first time that I had this opportunity to really plan on how can I really build the capacity. And it's really important for me as an education director because they are the inspiration for me. I have stayed with ChildFund for 11 years because I work with an incredible team that is in our country offices. They are so dedicated to this work. And they themselves are also affected by the adversity in these countries.
Mm-hmm.
And the children that we work with, they are very affected by the adversity. And so thanks to this gift, we were able to support training for our colleagues and also able to support data collection to do more research on the program. So we're learning more about what are the outcomes of the program and what do we need to change to ensure that we really reach the children that are most marginalized, and teachers, how do we really support them to be able to teach better and for their own well-being. And then lastly, also the caregivers. I am a mother of 3 children, and I will say that so many years I worked with caregivers in different countries on education programs.
Mm-hmm.
And now that I am a parent, I realize, wow, that it's so much harder to have the time to really dedicate to your children's education. And I have the resources and the knowledge. And so it's really humbled me, I would say. And so I'm really grateful that this gift was able to allow us to work in a different way and to focus on a program that is unique.
Yeah. That's so great. Thank you so much for sharing about that. I think this program will, I mean, we can already see the effects of it in Sierra Leone. And I know that I'm so excited to see it, we see us continuing it across our program countries. So I know that, you've talked a lot about how this was all made possible by a legacy gift. So kind of going off of that, this is a big question, but if you and your colleagues had unlimited resources for education, what else would you do to promote children's safety and education in our program areas?
Well, I would continue to do more research on how is the program best implemented in these areas.
Mm-hmm.
Because in some countries we're working in very rural areas, and some countries we're working in urban or peri-urban areas. But we really want to ensure that our country's colleagues that are coming on board, like Indonesia, for example, that they're adequately trained. That is really important to me. And there's a lot of countries who want to start implementing the program now that they see that there is results, and that children are attending school more, they're more engaged in school, their parents are more engaged in school, there's a reduction of corporal punishment. But there's resources that are needed to train the different colleagues to ensure. And part of that is also the partnerships we have. We have a partnership with the University of Texas, the clinical psychologists who developed pieces of the methodology. We have a partnership with universities in also University of Oregon, Georgia State University. We have partnerships with the different universities in the countries. Right now, we're working with the Ministry of Education in Sri Lanka and in Sierra Leone on developing a framework for social emotional learning. If that framework gets adopted, then all the children in that country will have more programs that focus on in education on social emotional learning, building those core skills, the precursors to learning.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, thank you so much. I think we're a little over 15 minutes until we're done. So I'd love to move into some Q&A from our participants if you'd be okay with that. One question that we got, which is really great. Someone asked, as children advance in schools, it seems like the amount of stress that they are under increases exponentially, be it due to testing, excess homework, dangerous paths to and from school, antiquated ideas about how learning is achieved, poor sleep patterns, or even lack of understanding and support within the home, which we talked a lot about today. Are there any programs in place to utilize up-to-date scientific and social-based information to help children learn how to study, how to handle educational stress, which again, I think we talked about a little bit, but in this vein, are there any parent workshops focusing on how to spot if their children are struggling and how caregivers can foster a relationship of support with tools? So maybe that's a big part of the program model we talked about today.
Yeah, I mean, that question's a great question because it's really at the forefront of the discussions for children and youth right now. It's mental health, and how does that support everything else? And education is affected by that as well. So that is one of the reasons why ChildFund, I mean, this is a shift. I'll tell you, it's a shift. It's a shift I've been slowly steering the boat to focus more on a holistic approach to education. And that holistic approach means that we work with the caregivers to support their skills, to be able to better model those skills for their children, and to support teachers as well. So we are working on that. And stress is a big thing for these children, because it's not only the educational stress, but it's the additional stress of the adverse environments that they're living in.
Great, thank you. We have another question that said, are parents generally supportive of continuing education that delays marriage for their children? I know that is a problem we see in a lot of our program countries, and maybe we can talk a little bit about what we do to, you know, increase that support from parents as well.
Yeah. Oh, we definitely heard that in Sierra Leone, in terms of, we heard that, and I don't know the exact quote, but the quotes were around, we used to think, you know, girls really should marry early. And we're learning in this program that the girls should be going to school, that there's a quote that's like a butterfly. If you take care of the butterfly will take care of the community. So investing in their children is really important. But I think, you know, it's not that these parents don't want to invest in their children, but it goes back to what we talked about earlier, is that many of them never been to school.
Yeah.
And they don't understand what is the value of education. You know, if they're majority farmers and have never been to school, then we need to help them understand what is the value of education. So yes, and especially in the countries in Africa where we're working, early marriage is a challenge. And that's one thing that we address in our programs with the parents. And for your family to succeed, education has to be a part of that. It's a vital ingredient.
Yeah, for sure. We have another question that said, what do most of the children do after, you know, their ChildFund support draws to a close? So likely they're speaking on sponsorship, but again, maybe off of that, we can talk a little bit about, you know, does ChildFund do life skills training? How does ChildFund help children pass that maybe primary and secondary education to hopefully continue to further themselves and, like you said, like bring success back to their families and their communities?
Yeah, so ChildFund works with children and youth up to 24 years old. We work with a life stage approach, which means that we support the developmental needs of children at different life stages. The 0 to 5 years old, and then the 6 to 14-year-olds, and then the 15 to 24-year-olds. And so we sequence the skills that we support and enhance, meaning that, you know, the skills that the early childhood need, we work on those skills. And then in the primary grades, we try to enhance those skills, which look a little bit different in the secondary. So we do work on the social emotional skills, the life skills. We work in job training and vocational skills. So we support children, but what we really try to do, and I think this is so important for everyone to understand, especially if you're a sponsor, is we are working to support the systems, the institutions and the systems around the children that are in the community and in their country. And that's what, in my role, that's one of the main things that I try to do, support the Ministry of Education to be stronger, so that in the end, there is a system that's going to support children and youth and then adults. And we have had children and youth who have graduated from our sponsorship programming come back and work in different ways, work with our local implementing partners, for example, or who are peer teachers. So there are opportunities for those children, but one of the things that we do is we support the system, and that's important.
Yeah, I think that's great. So one person said, great to see an evidence-based program. How specifically, I'm assuming we're going back to what we talked about with the education and protection well-being. How specifically do you inform parents and caregivers of your program? How do you engage parents? For example, do you invite them to contribute to culturally specific aspects of your program, etc.?
Yeah, so ChildFund works with our local implementing partners in the countries. I think we work with 191 local partners. So these local partners, they're civil society organizations that are on the ground. Mm-hmm. They support ChildFund to identify the families that are the most in need. They're the most vulnerable and for different reasons, and they live in adverse conditions. And so we specifically focus on those communities. And so we support the whole community of where those children work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's great. I know that something we really try and carry through all of our work here at ChildFund is our work being locally led. And I think that,
Mm-hmm.
through everything you've talked about today, that's shown.
I just want to add to that, one of the things in Sri Lanka that we're doing right now in Sierra Leone, where we're working with the ministry to develop this framework, we are conducting community-based research right now, getting input from the caregivers, from the teachers, from the local religious leaders, business leaders, education leaders, mm-hmm. on what are the skills that are most relevant to children in Sierra Leone, because they look different than those skills in the United States. Mm-hmm. And so that is what, how we get input from the voices of children and from parents to inform our programming. And this program, Education for Protection and Wellbeing, there is a framework, and we say that's the recipe. And I have explained it like, this is the recipe to make the cake. In all of our different countries, you need to have those eggs, you need to have the flour. But in Sri Lanka, you're going to put a lot of cinnamon. Mm-hmm. But in Sierra Leone, you might not be putting that cinnamon in. So it's really important for us to make sure that it's culturally relevant in each context. And that's what we've done. Yeah. And that's why my colleagues in the countries are so important, because I might know what the evidence is on a global level, but I am not the Sierra Leone expert or the Philippine expert or the Gambia expert.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you so much, Janella. Our time is coming to a close, but we appreciate you talking to us today about all of this great work we're doing here at ChildFund. And, as we've talked about, this is a program that we just want to continue on growing. And, clearly we have a great person leading the efforts for us. So thank you so much. And I am going to turn it back over to Brandy now.
I just want to say thank you everyone for joining. I can't see who you are, but what you do to contribute to ChildFund contributes to my work. And so I am very blessed to be able to do this work. I love my work. And so I thank you for being a contributor to that.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you both for this conversation. We actually have quite a few folks on this call tonight, and I think it just shows kind of the importance of, everybody is interested in how they can help with education. And then I just wanted to say, if you had questions and we didn't get to them, I know there are quite a few. We'll be, responding to those questions through email later this week, along with sending the registrants a link to this recording in case you want to listen to it again or share it with someone else. That would be great. And then, of course, if you'd like to support, any of the things that Janella has been talking about, this important work, or if you have questions, please reach out to your philanthropy advisor. And if you don't know who your philanthropy advisor is, then you certainly can email us at philanthropy@childfund.org, and we will be happy to work with you on that. And as well, I know that Janella mentioned that some of this work was possible through a legacy gift. And if you have, any questions or are interested in learning more about a legacy gift, please feel free to reach out to that same address, philanthropy@childfund.org. And we'd be happy to give you information on that. Well, I just want to say thank you to everyone for joining us. And it is Monday, so we still have a few more work days to go. So I hope everyone enjoys their week and stay healthy and have a good evening.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you.